Joining me now is Jamie Jacobs. She is the Deputy Director of Michigan College Access Network. Jamie, it's good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
You know, we're talking a lot about higher ed out here and trying to raise the percentage of people in Michigan who have an advanced degree beyond high school. And there's a lot of different factors that come into play. And then we're looking at economic development and bringing in new business, and they want to see those numbers. Yeah. Let's go ahead and take a step back first. And let me ask you exactly what Michigan College Access Network is doing right now to kind of help all of that come together.
Yeah, thanks for asking. I think there's a lot of pieces at play and a lot that we need to think about as a state. We need to think about supporting our young people, supporting our adults to return into higher ed, but also thinking about what this means for the state. So we are taking a sort of network-based approach. How do we all come together? We go, the old saying, you go further together. We're a state that hasn't done a lot of togetherness around this work, right? The business sector has been relatively isolated from the higher ed, sort of relatively isolated from K-12 and Michiganders in general. So how do we realize that what's good for Michiganders, which is better access to financial stability through education, which allows you to access in-demand, high-wage employment opportunities. How do we make sure K-12 understands that? That's what's good for individuals is good for K-12, is good for higher ed, is good for business, is inevitably good for the state. So we build local collaboratives to help focus on that work. So much can be done at the state level. There's so much policy that we can talk about. How do we have better financial aid policies? How do we better support students to have access, to have school counselors in their building that actually have ratios that allow them
can
to
help
serve
them and tell them what the path could be
what
for
are the
them.
Pathways?
What are the opportunities?
We were just talking about that. I think it was Kim Trent who mentioned it. The director of prosperity had said the pathways are no longer clear, right? There's that we've lost the number of adults we need to help students think about pathways, but the pathways have become a little murky. So how do we better connect those systems and get more adults into that system to make sure that we can help students, whether that's a traditional age high school student or an adult learner who's looking to come back or to skill up, understand where they should spend their time that's limited on the educational journey. We've got to do a better job at that.
You know, we have to talk about finances because we know that it is good to have a degree and that gives your financial trajectory and your career trajectory a boost, but you need to have the money to get there. And college has become so expensive. And also we've seen the funding from the state for our state colleges and universities slashed and never even back up to the same place that it was even in 2007. How can we afford these educations?
We've got to prioritize it. We have the funding. It's clear we have the funding. We've got to sort of put it where we think it needs to be put. I think this budget that's been proposed, the governor's budget, the House budget, the Senate budget, some of the most significant investments in K-12 and higher ed that we've seen in a long time. Significant proposals around expanding the success of Michigan Reconnect to reach a younger age population. What a great opportunity. Investments in traditional age students coming out of high school that have more financial aid. You know, Michigan is basically at the bottom of its investment in students, in state financial aid, let alone its investment in the institutions, right? So just looking at investments in students, investments in Michiganders to get on these pathways, we've been at the bottom. This would move us in the right direction. And I think there's a lot of positive momentum, but we've got to seal the deal. So
what are some of the conversations that you're having up here with business leaders and maybe members of philanthropy and whatnot about how to achieve some of those goals?
We've got to do it together. We've got to communicate. There's a disconnect for years, for what probably is decades. The business community sort of rested on its laurels, and students came through the pipeline that needed to come through the pipeline. They could grab educated students to fill the jobs they had in demand. The shift to a knowledge-based economy, what feels like to lots of us overnight, dramatically shifted, sort of flipped this system on its head, and we haven't responded. So the business community sort of hasn't been pushing data. They never needed to, but they've never been pushing data into the higher ed systems to help inform the pathways, help inform the training programs, programs, help inform the curriculum, but also what students should be on what pathway. So a lot of our conversations have been about that. Let's partner better. This is in your best interest. How do we better communicate? How can we as a statewide player help pull that information and that data that you have as businesses into the other sectors to inform what's happening, so that there's sort of this push and pull, right?
Yeah.
That we can push students into pathways, guide them on those pathways, but also know that businesses are pulling them up and pulling them through and are ready for them to sort of catch them when they come out.
That's right, and retain that talent. This is a huge part of the piece here in prosperity in Michigan. Jamie Jacobs, thanks so much for joining me. I appreciate it. It's good to see you.
Thanks for having us.